Hello, everyone. This is Jonathan, the executive producer of the LoJo Show. Just want to tell everyone to stay on after the podcast for a few quick announcements. Thanks.
Welcome to the LoJo Show. It's all right. I'll get better at it. Should I just say it? There is no monopoly on good ideas when it comes to cybersecurity. Hello, and welcome to the LoJo Show. We have a great show planned for you all today and are very excited to have on our very first guest, Nicolas Chaillan. Nicolas just recently resigned from his position of the first Chief Software Officer for the U.S. Air Force and Space Force. We are excited to have him on and get his perspective on all things artificial intelligence and the future of innovation within the Department of Defense and to keep pace with China and other world powers.
All right. Hi, Nicholas.
Hey,
How
this is
are you?
Nicolas. How are you?
Doing
With my
great today.
camera.
Doing great. Your sound sounds really good. So, Nicholas, welcome to the show. Just kind of starting out, would you give us just a quick background as far as prior to you joining the federal government or the DoD, what your background is for our
Of
listeners?
course. Yeah, and thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Well, I started back in France, as you can tell with my accent. I moved to the US about 11 years ago, but I started really at 15, created my first company. I was part of the team that helped create PHP. I was 14. 15, I created my company. We grew it to 12 countries. We ended up creating 12 companies over the last 20 years. So I sold 12 companies and around cyber software innovation, and then started DHS. After setting my 11th company, I wanted to make a difference. It was the time where the Paris attacks were going on and ISIS terrorist attacks, and so I started at DHS as the chief architect and special advisor for cyber, and kind of push zero trust and a lot of the best practices in cyber for critical infrastructure and all the .gov side of the house. And then I ended up staying for 18 months for my appointment, and sold my 12th company to Qualys, where I was the CTO at Qualys, publicly traded company. And then I got a call to come and help the Department of Defense, where I became the special advisor for cyber and DevSecOps, and based on the success of the DevSecOps initiative and all the work we're doing in DoD, we ended up creating the Chief Software Office, and I became the first Chief Software Officer for the Air Force and Space Force.
That is a very unique background, in particular for someone that has moved into the Department of Defense, and definitely as far as one being able to start up and build and sell companies from that end. So one is to our listeners out there, that Nicholas is actually very much so unique in this situation here. When you talk about some of the executives and leaders and stuff within our DoD and technology, as well as in cybersecurity and software, this is unique. And so one of the things that I wanted to dive into right off the bat was when you kind of first walked into this position, knowing that you've already been with the DHS, from there, what were some of the things that you said definitely made you feel out of water in some cases of, what, this is different. I'm going to have to take a step back and do this one step at a time. What were some of the first things that you just said, whoa, stop, let's start over here?
Well, I wish I spent more time trying to understand a little bit better where people were coming from. It's kind of one of the things I could have improved. I was kind of thrown into the water without a lot of background on the military and how things work. And despite my time at DHS, I can tell you it's a very different beast. And I was vastly unprepared, I guess, unfortunately. I remember this one of the very first meeting I attended, where you end up in a room with way too many people that doesn't exist on the commercial side. You end up with at least 50 people, both at the table, around the table, and so on. And that meeting was the SWAP study. That was the software study that was supposed to help DoD move to Agile. And I remember hearing people, and they a lot of them would use the right buzzwords, and And I remember thinking, that doesn't just sound very right. It doesn't feel like they know what they're talking about. And so, you're supposed to be in this room of leaders that will enable the move to agile. And so at some point, I I decided to ask a question that probably didn't create a lot of friends in the building, when I said, hey, but who is here even implemented agile in actual projects? And I raised my hand, of course, and only one person out of 50 plus raised their hands. And I was like, so what are we doing here? Like, why are we expecting people that have never done this before to do it for the largest organization on the planet? That doesn't sound like a good idea. And it doesn't, but it's not those people's fault. They're trying to do the best they can, right? But the fact is, it's complete nonsense, right? And so maybe some people understood that was pretty right, but it doesn't mean it was the right thing to say. So that was a good first step into the nonsense of bureaucracy. And honestly, the building is designed around this, where you see like the director of AI all the way to cloud and pick your poison effectively have zero background in the subject matter that they're supposed to lead, because we believe that it's just about leading and managing people, when it's not that true, right? Just like they would not let me fly a jet with good reason. I would probably not let someone that's never even had a cloud for their own personal use run the largest cloud on the planet for 4 million people. That's probably not a good idea.
No, and to that point, my background has been as a DoD contractor as well as a commercial. I was federal government for all of 6 months when I first came out of school, and someone said to me, he's like, one day you could have the big cubicle at the end of the row, and I think it was on that day where I said, I'm gonna go at this moment. I think I'm gonna leave. But to that point, one of the things that I've always had thrown up when we were looking at how you transition, from your traditional waterfall or whatever hybrid you were using to agile, and we always got this comment back, hey, this is reliability based engineering, right? And the approach that we want to take, and that's why we so stick to the waterfall and stuff there. But one of the things that we find is that we fall behind in timelines in that, especially if you want to go and begin to use things like rapid prototyping, right? And moving into that phase and being able to develop through, your DevOps and, securing through DevSecOps and stuff too of those programs. And then with that said, as you look at the current structure, of the Pentagon, as well as then when we get down to like the other echelon 2s and echelon, 3s and stuff too, that are, have acquisition activities and stuff too, and trying to build really the future there. What do you think is going to probably hinder us the most as we try to innovate very quickly and move into the age of, using and adapting artificial intelligence, looking at what's going on within hypersonics and stuff at this point, even just trying to do the acquisition of those things? What are some of the things that you see that's kind of top 3 that will hold us back the most based on the current structure?
Yeah, what's very interesting is, unfortunately, we don't have most of the basics of life to even think about AI, right? When you don't have a data lake, you don't have zero trust, you don't have rapid prototyping capabilities, you stuck in time, you don't have the acquisition principles to even understand agile and end-to-end agile, not water agile full, So I think when I look at the key steps to solve this, right, there's a few. One is, really embracing agile, end-to-end agile, not just agile in the software development, but really all the way to acquisition and contracting, buying capacity of work, training people. There's such a massive lack of understanding of what agile is. When I say 22 years ago, I was already using agile, and yet 22 years later, the department is still using waterfall as a default, right? So we need to move away from that. That implies also that Congress will change the way we fund things a little bit to some degree. There's a lot of pilots with the single color of money for software and a lot of different things that are important there. but also like just pure training, right? People, leaders, and people understanding what agile means, and what is the capacity of work? How do you groom your backlog? How do you prioritize work, and how do you continuously deliver it in the hands of the warfighter in small increments? And it's not about moving fast and tripping down and not being able to stand back up. That's just the wrong understanding of agile. Because you do incremental delivery, you should not fall down and not be able to stand back up. You should be able to, deliver small pieces incrementally and demonstrate that you bring value, tangible value to the warfighter, and whether or not you're going to the right direction. So it's all about, kind of getting the data to be able to measure efficacy, right?
Yep.
That's step one. Step two will be, kind of investing in our people. I was giving an hour a day to my people to learn, first to catch up and then learn. So I think that's very important. Self-learning with the velocity and pace of IT. You don't have a choice. You have to embrace learning. If people don't like learning, they should probably not be in IT. You used to be able to get away with 5-10 year cycles. Now it's much faster than that. You can be obsolete in a year. So you have to invest in yourself, and you have to do that whether or not the company you work for, the organization you work for, is doing it for you or with you. It doesn't really matter. But obviously the department should empower that and invest seriously in the workforce and create, software career path, cloud, data scientist, and have a progression of pay and title, and keep people excited. Back to your point on the cubicle stuff, right? I think it's important to see the progression and room for improvement, but also the mission, being so important as well. So that's kind of the second piece, and the third piece is kind of breaking the silos and really creating joint teams to solve some of the basics of life I was talking about. You can get to AI if you don't have a data fabric, if you don't have proper connectivity, transport mesh with 5G, satellite, fiber, right? So you want to bring all these things together into a centralized office. I mean, some people talk about DISA, but DISA is just not staff and not embracing the agile principles, picking a single prime to run things. We never did that. At Platform One, we always had multiple companies, and the government being the integrator, and the companies bringing diversity of opinions and of options as well. So you want to have that diversity. You want to have that ability not to get locked in, right, to a single company. But you want to have a joint team and merge your government talent and stop, Navy, Air Force, and Army reinventing the wheel and wasting taxpayer money when it comes to cloud and transport and basics of IT, right? You want to be able to build on top of that, and that's where the services should be focused on the top, where you actually bring tangible value to the warfighter with tangible outcomes. These other things are just enabler, of work, DevSecOps, cloud, AI, ML, data fabric, all these things, right? That should be enterprise funded and centrally managed.
I think one of the keys here is this. In our listeners, we have a heavy amount of folks that are from the aerospace and defense industry, and those that are also prime contractors and stuff out there. And I think one of the things we all know is the difficulty and the painstaking time that it takes to actually get a government computer or a laptop and get it to work, as well as even within there to be able to work together. And then least of all is that you have this environment that is very much so fragmented, in which case you can't reuse the data that you have because of the different walls, need to knows, and everything else that's there. Those tend to cascade at this point, from my perspective, into really becoming areas of concern when we start talking about being able to use AI, or even be able to apply things like machine learning and stuff to large amounts of data sets and stuff too from that end, to begin to kind of push things forward in government there. When you look at, let's say, the artificial intelligence, apparatus that we possibly could have, we get to see that in our commercial life every day, to what that means for military applications, or really, pushing our military, DoD, and government forward there. How would you kind of describe that dichotomy, what you have on the commercial side versus on the DoD side, and what is it that they should be taking from that commercial side at this point to help in opening that up? Is it more administrative, or is it more technical, or is it a combination of both at this point? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a little bit of everything, right? I think the culture and the lack of urgency and the complacency, right, of allegedly winning wars. Although I'm not sure we feel that way after the debacle in Afghanistan. Yeah. But I think people, unfortunately, still to this day, when you hear us call China a near-peer adversary, and you see Sputnik moments like the hypersonic launches and different things that China is doing in Russia, and we keep dismissing them as almost Sputnik moment, and it's not as big of a deal as we should describe them to be. That is very concerning, because you keep creating this vicious cycle of lack of urgency, and companies don't do that when you compete on the market, that where you see companies like Blockbuster and Kodak and others, right, miss the boat and disappear to some degree, or completely, and so companies don't have that luxury. The government and the taxpayer feel good about the fact that we spend more money in defense than many countries combined, but they fail to realize that I believe we only get 10 cents on the dollar on return on investment, because of the waste and the bureaucracy and the nightmare that is the acquisition process of the U.S. government. In fact, when I estimated work coming from the commercial side, doing this for 20 years very, very well, I would say, that's only 50K or 100K or whatever, right? And then you realize when you get the bids that you're 10x cheaper, because the companies have all this additional burden, and you're also stuck in the DoD bubble of talent, right, because of clearances and different things, and it's really designed to make it so there's less competition compared to the broader commercial side. I always remember when people say in DoD, I remember some of my first meetings, people say industry, the term industry for me meant all of the commercial companies, but for the most of the government officials, that meant the defense industrial base, a tiny portion, vacuum portion of companies, often with very subpar expertise in AI, cyber, and software. And that is concerning when you're limited and you don't have access to best of breed of everything, right?
Yep, absolutely. And to that point, and my background is also in consulting and professional services. So speaking with, C-suite, CISOs, CIOs, CTOs as well within, within commercial, industry. And I always notice a difference as far as in some of our, in those discussions whenever I would transition and begin working with DoD. And that is, while I can have a technical conversation with a lot of our CIOs and CTOs and CISOs even in commercial, that is not a conversation that goes very well when I try to transition that over to the DoD or to DoD leadership. And I understand why. I understand that, as far as in the structure there and what the commanding officer is within different areas and things, I understand that portion, but I find it to be a hindrance when you've got to walk down the line of 3 other subcontractors and several other CETA contractors, and then also a FFRDC in order to get an answer about a very simple systems administration type of issue that you might have in that area. And that's the scary part to me when I look at how are we prepared, right?
No, I mean, what's scary, right, is you and I understand why. Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, right? I would argue it's not, and we have to stop doing this. Just like they would not let me fly a jet or manage, a team of pilots, and they shouldn't, because I know nothing about it. They should not think of IT and innovation and tech as just putting 1, 2, 3-star general or colonel or whatever in charge of a team just because it's just management of people. It's not just management of people. You have to understand the subject matter to a lot of degrees, if not be an expert in it, but at the very least understand enough. And that's by far not the case. You look at who we put in charge of AI in Jake, and they are good people, right? I have nothing against the people, but a 3-star general with zero background in tech leading Jake is probably not a good idea, right? And you would never see Google, interview for their cloud CEO to pick someone that has never even run a small data center in their basement, right? That's probably not something they would do. And yet, we put in charge people of clouds that have never even done anything with cloud, and now we want to do it for the most complex, largest organization on the planet with the largest cyber risk and security risk, and we think it's going to succeed. How again? How are we putting the right things on the table for this to even succeed? It's already if I didn't have the background I had for some of the successes I brought to DoD because of my previous experience, I would have no chance ever to succeed bringing this to life, because you're dealing with the largest and most complex and siloed and vacuum organization on the planet. So you need to compensate that by having people not with degrees. It's not, I don't have a degree, but I'm not saying that because I don't have a degree. I think it's about experience more so than checking boxes, right?
Yep. Yeah, it is. And I think to that point, when we look at really how you expand from not just innovation standpoint, but kind of course the security discussion is always very important within that. But I can tell you, just over the last year and having discussions and stuff with even like with the Army over zero trust, and in particular trying to define what is really a software defined network versus a cloud network that was there, and going through that discussion, and then trying to kind of meddle through whether you need to deploy things like network access control or mission control, and should that be agent or agentless, or in going through those discussions at its rudimentary level. When you're trying to do an acquisition within 2 to 3 weeks with whatever fallout funding or whichever from that end, these are some of the discussions that are being had, and you just don't have the right people in the room to have that. And I think that's kind of still a microcosm of some of the things that are going on, because what they wanted to do is say, hey, we wanted to beat the Navy at this in order to deploy what it is they wanted to deploy. And I'm talking in generalities because I don't want to discuss the material impact or the material contract and stuff for that. But these are some of the things that I think really, from, let's say, a citizen standpoint out there that's not had any entry within the DoD, don't necessarily understand, as far as even with your post and starting to really kind of bring this to light, that this is not just a one-off problem or one-off issue. It is definitely tied into the culture and stuff that you have from a military standpoint, and what at some point has to evolve in order to want to keep pace with with the developments of innovations in AI, hypersonics, even things like smart factories at this point that our aerospace defense and defense industrial base are starting to try to integrate in order to, one, produce faster, produce cheaper, and to be able to get those innovations to market a little bit quicker too at this point.
And I never understood why we compete against ourselves when really we should be competing against China and Russia. I was always very concerned when I heard people say that, and it's very short-sighted, and it's a luxury we don't have, so and taxpayer wouldn't stand by that. That's kind of a disgrace.
Right. No, it does, because the paradigm has shifted, right? You used to have a moment where you had the Navy and the Air Force vying to create the next generation fighter jet, right? And vying to have that as their principal, foundational piece, which in some cases, granted, gave some good competition to the industrial base that was competing within those areas. But when we get to something that's more in the cyber realm, and it's more so in software and developing solutions for the new battlefield that's out there. It doesn't really work in that way. It's not, hey, everybody go to your different corners and create something, we might be able to use it. It's, hey, the innovation that we need at this point in time has to tie together. One, to have an operational military around, one that's prepared, ready, able to share information very quickly with one another, and able to really, isolate where the threats really are, right? Whether those are economic threats and stuff from there, whether that's to our private industry or a military threat from there too. These are all the things that now come into play that do not play very well to the different stovepipes that we have, across the board at this point.
No doubt. Yeah, and the next battles and wars will be won by software-defined means. So it's even more scary, because that's going to be the next edge and the next way to differentiate and maybe the difference between winning and losing. So we don't have the luxury of time, so.
No, we don't. And I think the last 2 weeks, even with some of the releases of where some other countries are at this point and things like quantum computing, to me really kind of jogs me, quite harsh, because the thing is that if we're getting led as far as in the quantum computing area, and really the idea from a cybersecurity standpoint is to make it as expensive and as complicated as possible to turn our resources against us, or to be able to get passwords, or to get able to compromise systems there, and you're now able to use quantum computing and those components against us as far as with those data sets that they've collected over the years. This becomes a big issue, things with old hashes and everything else that come to play. And I'm simplifying that, but these are areas that we would normally expect that our military was ahead on, things like DARPA and the areas there. And quite frankly, we're just not there.
Yeah. And, DARPA has now become so afraid of failing that, it's unable to innovate. When you compare with the ALPA days of World War II, it's a night and day comparison, and the velocity and the pace of DARPA is way too slow. They keep saying they're looking far ahead, but they're moving so slow that it's not that far ahead. And they can deliver in production in the hands of the warfighter rapidly, so that the cycle is completely wrong. It's done in vacuum in labs by PhDs that are looking for their cushy job for the next 5 years. That's not the kind of urgency we need to deliver capabilities to the warfighter.
Yeah. So with this, we've discussed a lot of things about one, kind of the data. We've talked about some of the nuances that we see in the bureaucracies that are formed within our DoD and areas there. But one of the things that I've definitely been a fan of, as well as trying to move forward in and implementing with our clients and customers, is zero trust. And I know this is the area that you've spent quite a bit of time in and really kind of leading the way on that. For our folks that haven't been really involved as far as understanding that within the DoD, zero trust, would you give us just an overview of your perspective on how what zero trust is, how it's being applied right now, and what is the future of its application as well within DoD, but also within even our own personal lives at this point?
Yeah, so zero trust is kind of the shift in mindset that unfortunately goes initially completely against all the principle of the DoD when it comes to perimeter defense, right? There's this whole notion of zero trust as replacing the perimeter. It doesn't mean there is no perimeter, by the way, but effectively the former legacy cyber defense concepts were designed around this big firewall wall that you have around your systems. But now, moving to clouds and mobile and different data centers, you don't really have that wall. And so it's almost impossible now to keep defending a wall that's just not there. And, a single malicious actor getting a malware into one of your devices now defeat that wall, right? So the concept of zero trust is instead around microsegmentation and enforcement of the user identity and the device identity. So based on the user and the device that they use, they get access to what they're supposed to have access to, in contrast to a VPN that's pretty much getting you access to the entire organization's network. This is microsegmented, so The technology we use in DoD is based on software-defined parameter, which is a concept of micro-segmentation around what we call a segment of one. That means effectively each connectivity, each device and user pair, based on the component risk of the device state and the user identity and role-based access control and the user identity in the organization, get access to what they're supposed to have access to based on that component risk of the device plus the user. So me connecting with a government device versus me connecting with a personal device, or a device that's not patched, or a different user connecting with a different government device, effectively gets a different, completely different micro-segmented network with an inability to even scan a network and see what else is there, because it's effectively it's using modern software-defined networking principles to isolate and create a completely segmented network. And so that reduces the ability of a malicious actor, right, to laterally move across the system and get to the controls that the user and the device don't have access to. And it's really doing a much better, more granular enforcement of access control and implementation of attribute-based access control, ABAC, on top of RBAC for basic roles. But you can go down to the data level and say, the who may be TSSCI, but the what is, secret rel, and based on who you are and the access you get, you only get to see what you're supposed to see, and you don't get to see that other cell in your data scheme. So there's a lot of very granular, powerful aspect of mitigation of lateral movement, and that's what we use in the Air Force and Space Force. And we created the largest implementation of zero trust in the US government about 18 months ago.
No, it's very neat, and it is very unique because again, the way that we interact with our devices, our computational devices, our data stores, data lakes, data components from there is become so diversified. So just for some of our listeners that are aerospace and defense, if you look at how we in the past have tried to secure you, it's been put the firewall around you, put antivirus on your device, give you a multi-factor authentication login and stuff from there, and voila, we've got security and stuff there. But we've found that that's not enough, right? Nor does it really lend itself to the new use cases that we have out there. We're in a world of Internet of Things or connected devices. And so when we look at things like where do you gain access to the resources you need? Well, it's through a device, right? That device should have attributes that should be recognized by other devices or even other endpoints that you're trying to connect to. And so in that case, you may have a tag. You may also have things like looking at your current security posture in that case to decide whether you're allowed to enter or converse with that particular server or so. So, the idea is that let's say you have a sensor that's sitting out on a launch pad, right? That sensor needs to speak to an application or so in order to make it run. That application can be in a data center or whichever. Well, that device needs to have some attribute from it that would be recognized by either that application or a controlling or broker in that case, right? From there, as you go through as far as the software and stuff, can you interact with this part of the software or that part of the software? You then have another decision point of, yes, it can talk to this, but it can't talk to it from an administrative standpoint. It can only be a user, or it can only gain information that's actually sent to it, but it can't either receive or send. So you're making decisions that are logical within that, within that security and that perimeter, right? What it's doing, again, you're removing just the wall that used to be there that was complicated to get turned off. And now you're just saying to each one of those endpoints, hey, you need to have these items, you need to have this user, and you need to have this way of connecting and communicating in order for us to accept you, right? And then those are things that can make decisions based on either time, it can be based on a security architecture or security parameter that's been set. But it allows you with more fluid communications, but also more secure, because now you're looking for multiple attributes and stuff too that's associated with it. So these things, as we look at things like zero trust and zero trust networking, as far as being able to say, hey, I'm not accepting you unless you have these things associated with you, and I can recognize you from something that's been previously configured. This is what's kind of pushing our way down the future and allows us to really interact with our physical world as well as with our software world of the future there too. So you can correct me if I'm wrong there, Nicholas.
No, you're spot on. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when we look at kind of the next explosion, I think we're on short time here now, but as far as the next steps and stuff that you see out there, we do a call to action with every one of our podcasts. What are some of the things that you see are just absolutely important at this point for both us from a citizenry standpoint to get involved with, but also for the DoD to begin kind of evolving to a better way of doing business? I'm going to stop right there and just let you kind of call those out.
Yeah, I think, first we need to stop being complacent, and we need to understand that China is really creating an existential threat to the nation and the future of our kids, and that we are running out of time, and we need to take action now before it is too late, because the velocity of AI and the volume of data they got access to, and the access to their Chinese companies, and of course hacking into the US companies as well, give them a very strong advantage that obviously is going to be tough to compete with. So I think what's very important to keep in mind is that we need to stop overclassifying all the threat we see coming on from China and Russia, so we can raise awareness, so we have companies willing and eager to come and partner with the DoD to solve this, because we have what people don't understand is we have great US companies leading in AI, for example, but the US government and DoD in particular have no access to it. So we need to solve that, and we need to make sure that companies understand and employees of these companies understand why this matters, and that they want to participate and help us fight that fight and win it. And we need to stop being complacent with China and calling them a near-peer adversary when they are a peer, if not leading in many of the most critical domains. The next wars are not going to be against camels. It's going to be against very advanced weapons, and we're not going to have the luxury of time to aggregate in Asia and go defend Taiwan. And so, autonomous capabilities, leaner, smarter, right? For people that have not read the book, the Kill Chain, right? I think it's a very critical book for everybody to read, because it does a very incredible job at describing what are the problems, but also what are the solutions as well. So I think that's really my call to action is we need help. We need your help. We need to wake up before it is too late.
We're down here on the Space Coast, right down from Cape Canaveral, and we've got some very large, both Space Force and former Air Force Space Command type activities down here in Defense Industrial Base. So I thank you for coming on and really going through these areas and stuff with us. This is definitely going to be valuable to our listeners.
Awesome. No, that's great. I love it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all for this episode of the LoJo Show. Thank you so much to Nicholas for coming on today. I hope our conversation was as educational and interesting for you as it was for us. Be sure to check the show notes, and if you want to come on the show, you can send us a message on any social media platform or on our website at blackingetech.com. With that, we will say goodbye. Have a great week, stay safe, and stay secure.
Hey everybody, this is Jonathan again. Thanks for sticking around after the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Just wanted to let you know that we're planning a Q&A episode for Christmas. So if you have any questions for Lovature about cybersecurity or any of the topics that we've talked about, please add us on social media or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy the podcast, please consider giving us a like and follow our social media handles. It really helps us reach out and find more listeners. If you want to be on the show or know someone that you would like us to invite on the show, send us a DM, add us on social media, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you and love to have you on. Also, just wanted to say that we are now on Pandora and iTunes, so we are on every major streaming platform, podcast streaming platform. So now you can listen however you want. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of The LoJo Show.